So, all right, welcome everybody. If you want to go ahead and go around and do introductions, I'll start it off. I'm Jordan Guyton. I'm from Open Media Foundation.
Okay, I think I'm next. I'm in the spot. So I'm Rosana Longo, and I am with KGNU Community Radio, and I am the bilingual equity reporter for the station. I have only been 9 months there, and the coronavirus hit us, and my work really changed, and at the same time continues.
Thank you. I'm Leslie Rolfe. I'm with Denver Open Media right now.
Anybody just jump in. I'm Tony Shawcross with the Open Media Foundation.
Anna Hines, and I'm with the Open Media Foundation.
I'm Diamond Hardiman, and I'm with News Voices Colorado.
Hey there, I'm Philip Clapham, and I'm with Colorado Media Project.
I'm Andrew Debigal with University of Oregon, Agora Journalism Center.
Tim Rousseau, folks know me as Timo. I'm with KGNU.
Erin Allhouse, Open Media Foundation.
And I'm Colleen Winneck with the CWDC.
Great.
All right, that's everybody. Oh, Tim?
Yeah, Tim introduced himself as well.
Good. Okay. All right, so let's jump right in. All right, so first things first, we did our introductions and we're gonna go through the agenda, follow it pretty closely, and the next thing we're gonna go into is outlining the next generation sector partnership model. All right, Colleen, then you need screen sharing?
Sorry. Yes. I wouldn't for the first couple slides, I guess, but
okay.
I might as well pump it up.
Right.
Oh, it's not letting me, but like I said, right now I don't need it. Out of curiosity, I guess raise hands. Has anybody not heard about next generation sector partnerships before? Are you vaguely familiar? Just a bunch of weird words all jammed together.
I think well, a few of them I haven't had an introduction.
Haven't had an introduction. Okay, because I was going to say I definitely am starting to recognize a few faces, and hopefully next week they're saying I'll get a camera, so then I'll actually be able to wave and say hello. But anyway, with the next generation sector partnership, the idea and the foundation is to put business at the center of the table. So we get the industry leaders from businesses in that particular industry in a room. They're kind of the center circle, and we ask them what their problems and issues and next steps, what they see for the future are. And on the outside of that circle, we have public partners like K-12 and colleges and economic development and chambers of commerce, just the multiple players that can really help, small business development centers. So those supporting partners that are really working, and maybe in multiple communities, maybe across a couple of counties. So it's a really nice way to get a regional perspective and focus. And that way, especially if, say, you guys wanted to do an education piece, you can communicate and let the colleges know, well, we don't need this, but we really are seeking this from our people. So that's the sector partnership portion and thought. So once you get into the partnership, come up with your kind of 3 main goals is what we typically go with. We make working groups for each of those. So once you've got a working group going, you're focused on something, whether it's transportation or healthcare or whatever. This one's media engagement. So the flow should be that basically you get a report out and just telling us, hey, these are our 3 focuses for our media group all together. And this is where we're at right now. And then, especially at the first stages, you want to formalize maybe chairs or co-chairs for each action team. Basically, you're identifying the first responders, hi, Sue is going to be the lead that really is passionate about this effort, and keeping the momentum going. And so after that, you're going to have ongoing action teams that's going to be held on a regular basis in between in-person full partnership meetings. So whether it's monthly or bi-monthly, you guys can decide. But you're just trying to get that hour or 2 a month of effort and work towards what you would like to see as your future goal. So you're still keeping the voice of business at the forefront, but then you're working with those public partners with the solutions that they might already have a portion of or even tap into, but find out what is there, what you still need, and if there's more people that need to come to the table to help out. So the action team is really that. You want to have an action team, 60-day plan, or like I said, 30, 90, whatever. You need to also identify any assistance requesting from those community partners, and with the co-leads in the action teams. And you also want to make sure to agree as far as when are we going to meet again, someday in person, but now Zoom meeting by phone, because you can have smaller calls. Maybe it's just a half-hour touch-in saying, hey, I connected with so-and-so. Oh, on the website we're building, we got halfway done, and here's where we're at. But you don't want to end it without having some sort of tangible next step of this is what I'm going to do after this to move us forward. And this is when I'm supposed to get my work done. So that's kind of the nutshell of what the working group does to kind of make momentum for the entire partnership.
Awesome.
And that is it on that.
Thanks, Colleen. And Colleen and Colorado Workforce Development Council have been a great resource. Their model for next generation sector partnerships has been really effective in other industries, and we're lucky that they are helping us bring it to media and journalism in Colorado. This working group is just focused on the engagement side of things, and yeah, I think our next presenters are going to help kind of define and even maybe broaden our definition of what we're talking about with engagement. Jordan, do you want to take back over or introduce Andrew?
Yep. So our next presenter is Andrew Devigo from Gather. We want to do some recaps and updates from our last engagement meeting. I know it's been quite some time. So without further ado, Andrew.
Thanks so much, Jordan. Is it possible to get screen share?
Yeah.
I hope so.
All right, got it. All right, so I'm going to share my computer sound as well. I'd love to just get a quick chance to play a video that helps sort of quickly define what we look at in terms of engagement, and it's really focused on relational. I know Tony and Jordan shared my diagram in terms of the continuum of engagement last time, but I thought I wanted to share this particular video because it was produced by one of our Masters in Multimedia Journalism students. And it just a nice little recap of what we mean when we're talking about engaged journalism. And then I'll jump in a little bit and share some resources that Andrew, perhaps would help support that. Yep.
Okay, good. It seems to be working now. Never mind. I was worried that maybe Zoom had tried some new technology to prevent prevent Zoom bombing because I couldn't see the video. It's all squigglies, but I can see it now. Can everybody else?
Oh, you can see it?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Let me just blow it up and play it real quick.
For over a century, journalism has mostly had a one-way relationship with the public. The media decided what was newsworthy, chose how to frame stories, and put the news out there. The public mostly consumed it. This was a transactional relationship. The internet disrupted everything. Suddenly, anyone could create and share their own content online. The internet also made it easier for people who felt unheard or misrepresented in journalism to find each other. This is part of why public trust in journalism has been declining for decades. Public trust hit an all-time low in 2016. The presidential election didn't help. It forced a reckoning. What was journalism doing wrong? The industry neglected its relationship with the public. A growing network of journalists believe it's time for journalism to involve communities as partners in the pursuit of truth and accuracy. Some call this approach engaged journalism. Here's a basic description.
Engagement is a popular buzzword these days, but for us it's pretty simple. Engagement is about making journalism more responsive to the public's needs, more representative of the public's diversity, and more inclusive of the public's voices.
In other words, the old ways of doing journalism need to become more relational. Hundreds of journalists in the US are incorporating 4 main practices of engagement into their work. 1. Listen first. The Listening Post Collective believes responsible reporting starts with listening. They offer journalists tools to do just that. 2. Ask the public what they need to know and report based on those needs. Outlier Media in Detroit offers residents financial data about rental units to help people make decisions about where they live. They then invite people to talk with a journalist. 40% of people take them up on their offer. 3. Invite your community to participate and collaborate. CAP Radio in Sacramento, California creates documentaries where community involvement is key. They invite participation in a lot of ways, such as hosting public conversations, involving the community in production, and meeting people where they're already at. Number 4, equip the public with skills. City Bureau in Chicago trains and pays residents to take notes at public meetings that aren't often covered. They've trained more than 500 residents in skills like note-taking, audio recording, and live tweeting. Listen, ask, invite, equip. These 4 practices will help journalism build more equitable relationships with the public. The future of journalism, and possibly the future of our democracy, depends on it.
So, thanks for watching that. I'll share in the chat a link to that video if you guys want to share that. But also, we just wanted to sort of indicate how sort of the direction, and you know, Alicia, who is our community manager actually now for the Gather platform, produced that piece because she's been taking also co-direct the Masters in Multimedia program at the U of O. And so she's been one of my students in that space as well, in addition to the engagement work. So at the U of O, I actually also direct the Agora Journalism Center, and one of our main initiatives is actually produce this platform called Gather, which you see on screen, that really kind of brings the community of practice of engaged journalism in here. So I just wanted to just sort of point out as a possible resource, as you saw in the video, there, you know, Alicia mentioned 4 specific projects of listen, ask, invite, and equip across different sectors, right? The projects in Detroit, Sacramento, California, as well as Chicago, as well as the Listening Post Collective, which is much more national. But what we wanted to do is how do we kind of continue to capture resources that people are doing and doing some really great work on engaged journalism. So that's why we built Gather to actually help to develop and bring this community of practice together. So if you go to Gather, that's gather.org, which I'll also share in the chat, you can really get a sense of the different kinds of things that we talked about. So listening was one thing that we talked about, right, in terms of the video. But if you wanted to get more resources around, say, how do we bring more community participation, you can really collect on that, and you can see a bunch of resources, whether they're actually resources or featured projects. You can just click on that, or we can look at featured projects, or we can even have case studies that really have some producers who actually built and developed these sort of longer case studies, so you can get a better sense of how people are doing it. So I know that I really appreciate the work of the Free Press, for example, and I'm glad to see Diamond here. I'm a big fan of what they're doing. So as you can see here, they've gotten some really good, like their Rona calls, and they're centering community information needs, what's happening in New Jersey, right? I mean, there's some really strong stuff that's happening in News Voices in the Free Press. So we did some really deep dives and some case studies about how they actually do that. Here's what worked, here's what it could have worked better, and so forth. So there's a large database of both resources, case studies, and featured projects. One thing I haven't noticed, I haven't talked about quickly, is lightning chats. On occasion, we also do these 30-minute quit lightning chats that anybody can help propose and ask for. And if you click on lightning chats, you can get a sense of different kinds of dialogues that we've been collecting over the last 3 years. Everything from newsroom analytics, looking at Census 2020, how do you take care of yourself as an engaged journalist, and so forth. So again, there's some great resources and great things to point to as you're becoming. One thing you'll also notice is that if you have a desire to go into one of the lightning chats, you'll also notice that the content is restricted to Gather members. So one thing we did recently do in the last couple of weeks is that we actually launched a membership. So you can, I encourage you, if you guys were interested, to actually sign up as a member. It takes just about 10 minutes to sign up as a member. You can fill out all this information. Obviously, Rocky Mountain is probably where you guys will be mostly selecting from. And then I'll quickly share what it means to actually be a member. So I'll change my direction. Once you become a member, you can suddenly get a sense of who else in terms of the membership directory. So for example, if we go here, you can get a sense of who else is on Gather. And since you guys are in the Rocky Mountain region, I'll click here. And you can quickly scan through, well, unfortunately only 5 members of including Tony as a member of the Rocky Mountain News membership within Gather. So in addition to the membership directory, you can also have other features. So for example, you can start collecting your favorites content on Gather. So this is my favorite content on Gather, including the great work that's happening at City Bureau. There's some really, like the News Voices guide of organizing and engaging with your community. There's also a great resource here from the Membership Puzzle Project that kind of talks about 25 specific jobs that your community can perhaps participate in producing media and journalism for you, or with you in terms of your community. And then Alicia's video also talked about the Listening Post Collective. So we also obviously point to the Listening Post Collective playbook here. So once you become a member, and then City Bureau's documentaries as well. So once you become a member, you can start collecting these resources and share your favorite resources on there. And then what else can I share about this particular resource? Oh, one thing I also would mention is that there's a pretty robust Slack group of engaged journalism on Gather as well. So once you become a member, you can find a link to become a to get entrance into the Gather Slack group as well. And right now, I think we have over, I don't know, 800 members on Slack of engaged journalists across the globe. So there's quite a decent number of Europeans as well as Asian engaged journalists from Asia as well. So I'll leave it there for now and open it up to see if there's any questions that people might have around this particular resource or any ways that Gather or the Agora Journalism Center can support this initiative, which I find really fascinating and exciting, and would love to learn more about how you're building these collaborations.
While we wait for anyone to jump in, I'll just say, Andrew, I appreciate you sharing that video. I hadn't seen that before. And I'll also share that when we started the engagement working group, there were several members that still kind of equate engagement with just kind of like outreach and kind of like marketing to kind of like, you know, just amplify that same kind of older model where you have the dinosaurs on both sides. I don't know why they make us dinosaurs, but dinosaurs on both sides and just kind of the one directional thing. And I just love your work because it helps broaden and change that definition of what we're talking about when we talk about engagement. And that article about like 24 or 25 tasks that your community will do for you. I love that because it broadens the edge, broadens it powers the edges, kind of broadens the definition of engagement. It lowers operating costs for media organizations. It increases content and participation by just like, again, powering the edges and kind of expanding. Plus it hits on all the diversity issues that we're talking about. Not everybody can afford to rehire their full staff or hire a huge amount of staff to increase their diversity, but everyone can be doing more engagement activities like those described in Gather and in a lot of the case studies you guys have pulled up. Because in some cases it doesn't add any costs, it could even decrease costs.
Great.
Any questions for Andrew? Great, well, thank you for joining us. Jordan, you want to take us to whatever's next?
All right. Next person is Rosanna from KGNU to talk a little bit about titulares.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Andrew, for what you show. I'm going to go check out the Gather, and I'm really curious about finding people that produce things in Spanish, just because, you know, it's really good for me to hear other producers and other journalists producing pieces in Spanish. You know, it's always a learning curve. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk to you guys today. I am not gonna go ahead and share my screen. I'm just gonna let you guys go into, yes, perfect, thank you so much. So that's KGNU Community Radio. That's our radio. We are doing fundraising right now, so you know. I wanted to share with you what we have been doing recently, and this is what's called titulares in Spanish, but they are headlines, news headlines. And the whole thing started, why? Because, you know, like, yeah, there they are. You see that block. So you can press them there. If you can press the icon, yeah, excellent. So when you see them, this one was done this morning. Yay, donate now, please. Okay, so this, you know, this is just this morning, done this morning, and it's about local news, and it's the headlines. And we started doing this, you know why? Because of COVID-19 and the urgency and the need for our community to know about what's happening, you know, to get the news about coronavirus, and also to get resources where to go in the case they, you know, they needed something. So it really happened. This was something that we thought about it when I started working in KGNU. We thought about this will come sometime, but we had to accelerate the process. So pretty much what I'm doing now in the mornings is I wait for our news director to produce these headlines, then I translate them and I record them, I produce them, and then I am adding beginning and end a piece of PSA, a public service announcement. And that public service announcement gives information about services around not only Boulder County where we are located, but in the whole state of Colorado. So this is a resource that is really needed, resources that are really needed for our community. And before you play it, I wanted to point out that this information, first of all, I always say the headlines are key because the way they are put together really bring to us what is going on right now. And it is, as you know, we are not commercial, and we really are bringing the news as it is. The scoop is basically something that's going on national and then local, but with a point of view that is different. So for me to translate this is huge. It's big. It's not that we are just producing, we copying, what is out there for corporate media to just feed us. So it's really, it's almost like homemade cookies. They're warm and nice and they taste great and they're done with good ingredients. And then we're incorporating these voices of people from within the community that are also reading the PSAs. Now, when you have these voices, these are people that already are known in the community. So the source is important for our Spanish community. If they don't, if it's much more important that the information comes from a good source that is reliable and that they trust, that if you spend a lot of money and resources and time translating pieces. So I would love it if you can play the beginning, the middle, and then the end.
Los primeros auxilios de la salud mental ofrecen recursos para el cuidado de la salud emocional a través de la compilación de recomendaciones de primeros auxilios para la salud mental con el fin de ayudar a las personas a cuidarse a sí mismas y a cuidar la salud emocional de sus seres queridos.
So that's a community member, Rosanna?
Yes, well, that is somebody that is helping us produce these two. And there's another voice that come in. So we have, in a PSA, you have 3 voices. So if you can play it a little more, it's going to finish.
Es traída a ustedes gracias a la colaboración entre KGNU y el colectivo comunitario de Suma Latina. Para más información y recursos, visite pocosuma.com.
Con los titulares de la mañana del 9 de julio del 2020. El ayuntamiento de...
So that's me, starting to do the news there. And then if you go towards the end, again, you're going to listen to another PSA that has another content again that gives you information about services.
La mayor brevedad posible. La oficina legal de CU Boulder ofrece servicios gratuitos tanto para...
So that's CU Boulder has a law clinic, and the information is key because people can go there and get services and get advice for free. These are super important. The first one was, if you need urgent care, I should say, urgent care, and the other one is law. So on purpose, we're putting them together like that so that people can get the service information, then the news content, local news, and then again, it finishes with that. And the music is on purpose too, because we are all about music. The way to bring the Spanish-speaking audiences to listen is with music. So we did it on purpose. And now, maybe the most important thing is that now we're doing this via social media. And our community pretty much, they use a lot of WhatsApp. So these are easy little, 5 to 10 minutes at the most with information, key resources. I really invite you to share these around because they're, they have really good content. Not only locally, I will say, but these could serve you, in many areas. I think that's it with the titulares. And if you can go down, you can also see that besides the audio, there's also the piece, in writing that can be easily, also shared. Down there, you can share it, you can tweet it or whatever you want. And we also try to keep the ones, so this, where it's produced morning and afternoons. And we're also keeping the one the day before. So that's the headlines. I think that we're gonna continue producing these, from now on. Yes, we started because of coronavirus and the need to communicate to the people important information. But behind this, there's a whole collective. So when the PSA was finishing, they were talking about the SUMA collective, and it is a group, a bunch of from within the community. So now we have those 3 voices. I'm pretty sure that we're gonna start getting more people into producing radio pieces and all that. So that's the beauty, like you're saying, Andrew, it's a matter of sharing, because then other people will continue producing. So it's the same model of bringing the people from that community to produce this and to give us the content that they think is important for us more than anything. So strategic. And now if you can take me to the Trends podcast, and here's the magazine, here's the Trends magazine that I'm basing now, the podcast that is called the Trends podcast is based on this magazine. Now, what we have in front of us, the Trends Diaries, this is a production that is done again once a week, and pretty much it also started because of the coronavirus. COVID-19 really accelerated all these things. These are stories of people that are sending their own stories. You can stop there because now, all those are Trends Diaries, but what I produce is this Trends podcast. So if you can press there where it says read more, we can go down to underneath.
Oh, here?
Yes, perfect. So this is the one about COVID-19 and how it exacerbated, existing inequalities for people of color. And we normally, it's a deep dive. This takes around 3 weeks to produce. And normally I have had the opportunity to go out and interview between, let's say, 8 to 10, 12 people to produce this piece. So it's voices from different sectors. And once, I bring all of them, I'm saying we because with the news director is how I have been able to produce this. So it's normally, it's a podcast. I say it's a short documentary that has many voices and it has, one topic. And in this case, we were super lucky because I had the opportunity to bring also Spanish speaking people to share deep, their situation with COVID-19, lack of jobs, lack of access to resources, and also to the federal money that a lot of people receive during this time. Well, besides that one, there's other Trends podcasts that I have been able to put together. And the one that we started with, if you go down, let's see if you can go to number 2. That's perfect. 2. Well, so here, here you have Trends podcast talking about isolation among seniors, mobile homes. Those were the first ones that I work on. And if you can go now back into number 2, I'll show you the one that we have received. Yeah, number 2. So we produced this one that is about diversity. Let's see. Yeah, if you can go into that one, equity, inclusion and equity. So this one has been the one that has had more people tuning in. And, the topic when we put it together really, this was in February. But now with the riots and, you know, I should not say riots, with protests around and requests for equity, racial justice, this has, you know, we played again, and we have had a lot of people tuning into this one. We had the opportunity to interview, videotape, and I'm forgetting something super important. So besides producing the Trends podcast, what we do is once it's released and it goes, you know, in the radio, after that, we are opening to a discussion. So it's a panel discussion, and we bring people that have been interviewed for the podcast and other people that have not, just to, you know, to continue the conversation in a way to find kind of solutions or resources for the topic that we are touching. I give you an example. One of those panel discussions, we invited somebody from Habitat for Humanity, and during the panel discussion and the interview, this person connected with somebody that was a young one, a DACA student, and they connected, and also the person from the Habitat for Humanity announced there in the show that they were accommodating people without documentation to be able to own their homes here at the mobile home park that the city of Boulder purchased. So the beauty of really almost like creating the news at the moment when you are like putting out there things and inviting people. And I think that with that, I'm going to say mano a mano, y voy a pasárselo a Timo. I think that Timo can really complement what I have been talking about. That's it. Gracias.
Thank you, Rosanna.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rosanna, for passing the mic there. I don't have anything to add. Thanks for presenting that. I think that Rosanna presented, you know, a couple of great projects that she's leading here at KGNU, and really things that have been excellent as far as incorporating community into the reporting process and highlighting some of the solutions that community itself is coming up with, whether that's working with the cultural brokers from Suma Latina, who are the ones that have identified and put together a very in-depth spreadsheet of resources that are priority resources that community members should know about, and helping to get the word back out. And so it's really about that community partnership, and I think was just a great day to be able to help to present some of this in the spirit of engagement from that side of things. And it's generated more relevance for us and for the community, and also for a historical listener group from our community that are in the influence side of things, to help them get educated about sectors of the community that they may not be as educated or informed about.
On that topic of engagement, Timo or Rosanna, if you guys had to guess what percentage of on-air, you know, talent and DJs and hosts, when you're listening to a voice talking on KGNU, what percentage of the time is that a paid staff member of KGNU, and what percent would you guess? I know you don't have this like exact statistics, but what percent would you guess is a community volunteer, community member versus a paid staff member of KGNU?
Sure. So our model is very much historically based on almost 99% of what's aired is aired by volunteers of locally produced content. Certainly the music side of things, we don't pay anybody to be on air to curate the music. Our music director does maybe one show a month. And so there's complete creative freedom there for folks. From the news side of things, the local news is produced by our news director, and just in the last year with the hire of Rosanna, and then also with Hannah Lee that helps on the digital side to produce and disseminate the content. It's the first time that we've ever had more than one full-time staff in the news department. So we've got about 70 people that produce news from around the community, but now we have definitely recognized that in order to maintain a level of consistency, and in particularly with younger generations who are not baby boomers that get into a volunteer position for a 30-year term, you have to invest, and you have to invest in diversifying the newsroom at the same time so that broader swaths of the community are there. And so part of Rosanna's role has very much been engaging with community and learning from community, and bringing folks in not only to produce, but primarily to highlight and amplify those voices by looking at a solution side of things from their perspective.
Thanks. Great. Jordan, is our internal kind of reporting piece up next, or what's next?
Actually, it is about the collab Slack is up next. Yep. So how many people are already a part of the collab Slack so far?
Awesome. Tell you what, I can tell you guys just a little bit about it, and I'll throw the link into the chat. But about 3 weeks ago, for those of you who may not be familiar, the Colorado Media Project partnered with CoLab and with Rocky Mountain Public Media to hold some small peer-to-peer listening sessions with local journalists. And the goal was to sit down honestly in confidential space to discuss issues of race and diversity, implicit bias, institutional bias, and areas for growth in our newsrooms. And what we kept hearing in a nutshell was that in order to really do engagement and work around these issues, that journalists needed tools to undo their own implicit biases in order to not do harm in these communities that they were reporting on. And so we put together some of our findings. I'll send you that link as well in the chat, where you can also find a link to several resources that the Colorado Media Project has put together. But in regards to the Slack channel, it's another resource. We're inviting folks to come in there and to really lean on one another about questions or concerns that they may have about these topics. I think that it's in the ethos of what we heard from you all was that we really want to create space and not to take it. And it's also an opportunity for those in newsrooms who don't want to necessarily lean on folks within their newsroom to ask some of these questions, that they can possibly find someone in the ecosystem that they're familiar with and feel comfortable with to really sort of tackle the issues together, share resources, and further the conversation. So I'll send both of those links right now.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay, so next thing.
Are you gonna just go? Sorry. I wanted to just say that I was able to participate in one of those and it was really helpful.
It was. I second that, being on this session. I was glad I was able to, even as a non-journalist, be a part of it. It's very insightful.
I just want to say, I think, Philip, I tuned out for half a second, but I think you mentioned your Medium post, but Philip just had some really great synopsis of everything, and we're definitely using that to think with partners, including this group and whatnot, about what types of resources are needed moving forward. So thank you to Rosanna and Jordan for joining. And thank you to Philip for doing such an amazing job with the whole thing.
Great. So on that same note, in one of our other working groups, we compiled one of our action items was coming up with a diversity tracker that we use both internally and also externally. So we came up with different groups to track diversity, such as all the way from the board. But for this meeting, I want to focus on our job seekers, our interns, and our on-air personalities. So I can pull that up right here.
So I'll just do a little bit more introduction to those that aren't. Like Jordan just said, in another working group focused on diverse hiring and retention, it came up that a lot of people wanted to be able to have a comparable way of reporting on their internal diversity. And so we had gotten a grant from Denver Foundation for our inclusiveness committee to work with BBC Consulting to have a good standardized way of collecting this demographic data in a way that could be compared against census data, so that we can see how our internal groups of representatives match up with our communities, our neighborhoods, our state, and the populations that we're trying to serve. And so just as a brief intro, originally we just started with, okay, clearly with our board of directors and employees, we want to track, racial and ethnic identity, gender, sexual orientation, age, income level, levels of education, and then physical and mental disabilities. But as we've had these engagement conversations, we also want to see how groups that aren't necessarily part of our staff, like even our employees, board, and interns, but groups like our on-air personalities that aren't staff members, like Timo and Rosanna have also at KGNU, the members of our radio station who are producing content and using our facilities, also all the job applicants who apply for our jobs here. So these three groups are kind of like internal this would be diversity statistics and metrics on our internal team, but Jordan's going to talk in this engagement group about what he's just begun this month in collecting this same kind of diversity data on groups that are involved with the organization but aren't directly employed by us. So Jordan, you want to go ahead and share what you've compiled so far?
Yeah, sure thing. All right, so let me just share screen here. All right. Okay, so here we have our data. So I'm going to start from our job applicants. So when looking at this data, we send out the template for everyone to track it as well with all the formulas too. So the one things that we call to action is when we see what populations are we serving and which populations are we not serving effectively. So scrolling down to our interns, for example. So anything that is typically above 20% or under 20% or in the negatives is a population that we're not effectively serving. So by using this, we try to collaborate with the other groups to increase and come up with an action plan on how to get diversity rather than just talking about diversity in whether it be the staff or whether it be going out to the communities and getting authentic voices to tell their stories. So with that, this was a giant project that we came out and where it's able to roll out. And I can also share that with the rest of the group if you want to also mirror a similar thing and implement this practice within your organization too.
Great. Any questions for Jordan? And we're still just getting started on this, at least with tracking the extended groups. Timo?
Yes, I've got a question for you all as far as the process of this. Again, got a large volunteer base there, and this is often a debate that community media has that's largely powered by volunteers, is how much you can require of folks when pushing a survey of this sorts out, and in trying to push for their responses. And even I think I saw on there a couple of choose not to respond. So how do you grapple with some of the sensitive issues around that when folks are hesitant or don't trust responding to surveys like this to maintain the accuracy of this? And are there tools and mechanisms to really help folks feel as comfortable and make the survey as inclusive as possible for folks to feel comfortable responding for this? Or what language do you put out so that they understand the importance of it for the organization to better understand how we're serving the community?
Yeah.
I think there's a different answer to the different groups too, because like when we were doing the hiring, Melissa and Colorado Media Project and some of our early guinea pigs that we were working with on that had some very similar concerns. And so we got some help kind of changing language and intro in those questions to make them a little more palatable, but we still always make it optional. And then I think it's a slightly different answer, and Jordan would have, of course, the best perspective when it comes to yeah, the volunteers and members and that sort of thing. Jordan, what's been your experience with that?
Yeah, so when implementing any type of survey, you're gonna always see some type of resistance or people that aren't really, as receptive. But when you map it out as it's something that is trying to change initiatives or change current trends in our industry, and you showcase the numbers, then people tend to gravitate towards it a little bit better. So reflecting back to where we showcased in previous meetings, saying that newsrooms are typically are 10, what was the number? Probably about 10 to 15% less diverse than any other sector. It's showing that even though you're operating in volunteer, intern capacity, or even non-staff capacity, that it still matters to show these type of numbers and fill it out. So we can try to work towards a better way. And that's why you see things like documenters even coming around, just because, people aren't able to go in and tell their story or go and talk about their community without having to assimilate in some ways too.
And I'll just quickly show that data again, Timo. You can see that when we actually do the reporting, we've got the number of applicants, the percent of applicants that answered any of those, but then when you take out the people who don't respond or who say prefer not to say, when we're actually doing our data comparisons with the census data, we're only comparing those who actually chose to answer the question with an answer. So we're not including those who either don't answer or who say prefer not to say. That way we're able to let people not answer, and as long as we get a statistically significant number of people that do answer, we can still hopefully get some good data. What's next, Jordan?
All right, so up next we have Diamond. We'll talk a little bit about News Voices Colorado.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. I'll just do a short run over of what the News Voices project is and News Voices Colorado. So News Voices is a smaller project of the larger Free Press. And we have a few sites in Philly, New Jersey, and North Carolina. The Colorado site and project is new, and we're working on the launch right now, which is what we're here to update you guys on. But in general, News Voices Colorado looks to take a community organizing and a community engagement approach to local news and media. So how can we engage community organizing and community members in playing a role in transforming how local news responds to their needs and their narratives and their desires for how they see themselves in their community. So in terms of that, we're going to be launching pretty soon, sometime in August. And with that launch, we're going to be doing a large social media kind of rollout, especially given that everything is digital now. So hopefully we can provide some more updates in ways that if you guys are all interested, that you can collaborate on that social media strategy. A lot of our goal in that is to, one, introduce ourselves to the community, but also to use it as an opportunity to get community buy-in and community response, feedback, all of those things about what their visions are for local news. And along with that rollout, we'll be hosting some community listening conversations. And the first two that we're floating around right now are one centered on COVID-19 and immigrant populations in Colorado. And we'll be hosting one in English and one in Spanish. And then the second one that we're interested in doing is around the uprisings that are going on in Colorado. And we're still in the beginning planning stages of those, but in talking with community partners, one of our bigger goals is to make sure that we're getting a lot of different areas of Colorado, because we know that there's a lot of things going on in Denver. So we're making sure that we're trying to reach out to different communities so that they can be a part of those conversations. And then also including our community partners in the formation of those conversations. So framing them and framing the questions and the topics of discussions in ways that'll be most valuable to them. So more updates to come, and yeah, more ways to participate coming soon, for sure.
Great, thank you, Diamond.
All right, thank you. Okay. The next thing is Colleen to talk a little bit more about leveraging opportunities for collaboration.
Okay, thank you. Let me try and share the screen this time. Okay, these first 3 slides, I just wanted to talk about a tool that you can use called the Strategy Triage tool. Basically, all 3 of these slides are using the same format. One's just explaining, and I like having the different colors kind of going around the room. So when you're looking at re-engaging, what are our priorities? What were our priorities? Oh no, you know, now with COVID, we absolutely have had to hit the brakes, reset, regroup. So this is a really nice way to look at what you were doing or what you were looking at doing on upcoming goals and strategies, and it just you know, walks you through each item. So the guiding question, it's saying what will it take to get to this step and get to that topic, and from that you just funnel everything that you're going to do into either current priority. Yep, we still are going to do it. We're going to keep moving forward. We might have to change how we're doing. We can't meet in person. We're going to do Zoom meetings. Other things, pause and resume when it's over. That you just can't do something without getting together. Then it's down to the emerging priority or existing but newly prioritized. So maybe it was previously a back burner issue, but hey, all of a sudden getting new communication tools like my video is front of mind, and then you just move it to more of a upfront need and reprioritize that. It used to be a C level, now it's an A level item. Unknown status, sometimes, especially, you know, we keep hearing maybe there will be an even worse resurgence. Maybe we'll have to close stuff down. If there's just too much flux to actually take a step, and that it could be, you know, just spinning your wheels if something changes, that's good to just have that pause button. And then the honor and let go is just, we just can't do it anymore. It was a great idea, but yeah, we just can't do that at this time with our budget, whatever. So it's a really nice way to re-examine what you had planned and look at the holes and saying, wow, do we have to make tweaks in everything, or can we move forward with these 2 or 3 things instead? So this is just the blank document without those guidance, and this just shows a couple of examples that somebody put in with their neighborhoods forward. They can still do training, they can still do some projects, they can still do financial training, fundraising, they're still going to do that. They're going to wait on a big in-person gala event. So it's just a nice little example of how a different group used this to look at all their strategies. So this could be used by an individual, a business, an organization, whatever. So I really like the way it kind of recognizes, especially with honor and let go, because sometimes it really is something that you'd had high hopes for. I mean, look at all the poor kids with graduations that they didn't get to go to. And yeah, so they just had to, obviously, sometimes they figured out a way to do something, but definitely not the walk across the stage with 500 people in front of you. So then the next thing is on strategic doing. which is what could we do, what should we do, what will we do, and what's our 30-30. And the what's our 30-30, what can we get done in 30 days. And so this is one of their maps, so it's kind of similar. But like I said, the strategic doing, it's a big process if you get really deep dive into how to do it. But those are the 4 main questions and just narrowing down. But with a working group, this is a really, really good way to make sure that you really are taking action. It's not just a good coffee break for everybody to hang out and get together. We're wanting an outcome, we're wanting success, we're wanting movement. And even if that movement is like, wow, guys, I hit a dead end, that's okay to bring that back to group, because then you can figure it out. So you're looking at what do we want to do? What's it going to look like? And so within like this working group, you know, what priorities do you guys have? How could you address attracting more media? You know, how many different ways do you want to try? And so you just list that out, just very cut and dried. And this is a really nice way to be able to just do an update. Okay, this is where we're at. You know, we're going for A, B, and C. And currently, here's our milestone. We're halfway to this one. We've just started on this one. We're changing this one, or, you know, hey, we got it done, so you can celebrate and win and take that back to the group. So the short-term action plan, when you do the official strategic doing meetings, and when they talk about it, it's very harsh as far as even in their meetings. It's if you just came here to sit and watch and not participate, please leave. So it's very cut and dried with some of that, but they are dealing with many times, like, you know, city planners and other people across the region, etc. So so nobody wants to have their time wasted, and you definitely don't want somebody hogging the floor space with, well, I don't like this, and this isn't going to work. And, well, I don't have time to help either. So it's a nice way to get rid of those people if that is a problem ever in your organization. But with that, as I was saying before, with the meeting groups, this is one of the ways to look at, you know, what am I going to do in this time frame by when? And this way too, when you're doing follow-ups, some meetings coming up, we're getting to the next phase, it's easier for the convener or the organizer to just shoot an email going, oh, hey, you said you were going to get this done. What's our status? And it's an easier way to check in and find out if we're on time, or if we're running early, or if we're running behind time. So then the 30-30, like I said, you can decide how often you want to meet. Some people want to meet weekly at first, depending on what their project is, or if it's really going to be a meaty, like, planning phase. So who's going to be there? When is the meeting? Where is the meeting? Who's going to do that emailing and the follow-up? And they say who's uploading it to the hub, but whatever communication path, Slack, whatever you want to do as far as keeping everyone up to date and current, and that way you can invite people in. So that is the strategic doing portion. Does anybody have any questions on that?
I want to add for people that, you know, for those that aren't looking to get into this level of kind of coordination, of course, we were happy for people to just be participating, but we want you to know that this is what's going on in the background, and invite any of the other members of the working group in to kind of help coordinate in this way. Any other questions for Colleen?
And I do know that last year we had a TA module that people could apply for and get kind of a grant to be able to come, and it was a is a 2 or a 3 day event to really deep dive into the strategic doing method. And you can get certified and training and stuff like that. So it would be available on our CWDC website. And I shared the link to my presentation to Tony and Jordan, so they can share it out to anybody that they want to.
On the topic of those, our priorities and the strategic doing model, Philip a couple days ago was nice enough to introduce us to another kind of working group that's been working on a lot of similar projects. And I just added to the agenda at the bottom 4 kind of initiatives that they had been talking about. I hoped that I spoke to Danica yesterday, and I hoped that she was going to be joining us today. But a couple representatives from the Denver Post, and then also Susan Gonzalez from Chalkbeat, were kind of taking the lead on some initiatives that really fit into the focus of this working group. So we're wanting to make sure we aren't replicating efforts and combine forces. But a brief overview of those 4 kind of initiatives that they talked about. First is a staffing diversity report. They're really interested in the same kind of work Jordan has been doing, where we try and figure out the staffing diversity of all the different newsrooms and media organizations in the state. We let them know that we had also heard that INN has some similar data, so we'll be working on making sure that any data we're collecting follows their kind of structure and rubric. And if anyone knows of any other groups, it was Danica had heard that possibly the Trust Project also had been collecting some of that data. So that's one, staffing diversity report. Another is they're really wanting to create a database of freelancers of color, knowing again that hiring isn't the only way for these media outlets to diversify their teams. We do have this great database now of well over 1,000 job seekers and applicants in the field. So we'll be, if there's other people wanting to build this database of diverse freelancers, we'd love to help partner on that. A third is they were interested in creating a mental health fund for journalists of color. And fourth is high school workshops on this topic, which really overlaps with what we've heard are also goals from the Colorado Broadcasters Association, Colorado Press Women, and then the Colorado Office of Film, TV, and Media has said that these presentations in high schools and getting the schools to be more aware of journalistic principles and media literacy is one of their primary goals for the year. So that's our goal here with the sector partnership, is trying to make sure that that when we're all working on similar things, that we're working on them together whenever possible and reinforcing each other's efforts. But I wanted to throw those 4 initiatives out there in case anyone on this call is like, yes, we'd like to get involved in that, or we want to add some other initiatives on top of that. Philip had mentioned some, sorry, I forget the phrase that we were using, but evaluating kind of sources and perspectives. What was the best way to summarize that, Philip?
Yeah, so we talked about content audits. I feel like it's like the flip side of the coin of looking at the diversity in your newsroom or lack thereof, and then really seeing the impact and sort of the output as a product.
So I want to just hear from everybody else in the group, any other priorities they think we should be tackling, or that you've already heard about that you want to just partner on.
I'd like to share, if I could. This is Letitia Steffen. I originally joined a meeting in the past because Sandy Nance with Colorado Press Women let me know, but I'm a professor and administrator at Colorado State University Pueblo. I'm also active with the Society of Professional Journalists, and I chair their J-Ed committee. And I know they've been trying a lot of things, and as many of these journalism organizations have through years and years, to really, I think, little effect. But one of the things that our committee is working on, and I don't know if anyone would have ideas on how we could get more teeth into this project, or if it is even, worth kind of pursuing, is I have compiled a list of all of the minority serving institutions across the United States and Puerto Rico, based on the category that they fall into. And it's a huge list. And you know, as a committee, we're trying to figure out, okay, what do we do with it now? We were wanting to maybe cull it down to really focus on what are some, you know, really good institutions that we could do some outreach to encourage more programming or ways to support or anything. So I don't know if, and maybe some of you already know of efforts that are happening like this, but that was one thing that I've been involved in recently that I would love to get feedback from folks on how we might utilize this list to be a benefit somehow.
And what was the original goal of compiling the list, Letitia?
So what we were going to do as a committee was, because we are from all over the country, is try to identify the minority serving institutions. And I realize that that's kind of a problematic title for some of these institutions, because really a lot of these student populations end up making more the majority than the minority. But we wanted to reach out to these institutions and see if we could get them engaged in some of the things that the Society of Professional Journalists are doing, get students who are interested in just writing or getting into journalism. They don't have to be studying journalism, but just getting into the field, encouraging them to get engaged in the field of journalism more. So that was kind of the ultimate goal. Yeah, and I see I've got some questions on the chat.
Oh, I think it was me. I just was curious. We're talking about colleges and universities.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
no.
So,
There are a lot of institutions out there.
like historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. Here at CSU Pueblo, we're a Hispanic serving institution, so that's an HSI. There are all these, you know, acronyms that, you know, in higher ed, we love these acronyms. And so there are, I think, 5 or 6 different designations of colleges and universities that I think it's a 25% or more population of students who fall into those categories. So that, yeah, that's, thank you for asking that. I assumed too much.
This issue also came up as kind of a shared priority and interest area in the work that Colorado Media Project coordinated with INN at Rocky Mountain Public Media about a year ago. I don't remember exactly when that was, but it floated to the top as kind of a priority. And so we had been doing a lot of outreach to Colorado Office of Film, TV, and Media, who said that's their number1 focus, and Colorado Broadcasters Association, and had intended for that to be its own independent working group. But they weren't very motivated to kind of collaborate or really meet with it. CBA just said kind of, we have our own thing going, and Colorado Office of Film, TV, and Media they're like, we're always happy to meet, but yeah, we also have kind of our own visiting program, and we're aware of CBAs and whatever. So there wasn't that much motivation in that group, so we ended up just kind of merging that into here and figuring we'll do any engagement with schools as part of the engagement working group, because they were so unmotivated to work. But if you have any kind of like guidance on how we can get more traction on that, it keeps coming up. It is a focus of a lot of groups participating in local media, Society of Professional Journalists, Colorado Press Women.
And I know we have had contact from both of those organizations at our university. So maybe if I reach out to some of the people who are involved at those specific organizations, just to let them know that, hey, I've got this list. I don't know quite what to do with it, but maybe if we just get some conversation going around what can we do with this and what would be some next steps. It's a huge list. That's part of the, I guess, challenge, is trying to figure out, okay, we've got this massive list, now what? And I think that's where we sort of, in the committee I'm on, really sort of hit a bump in the road and trying to figure out where to go from there.
Yeah.
Letitia, this is Philip. I don't have any answers, but I'd just be curious to see of those institutions, have you compiled how many have journalism majors and programs? And okay, yeah, I'd just love to see what that.
And I think that would be a step, but then part of me didn't want to limit the list in case there were students who are studying other things, who we would want to encourage to consider coming into media, you know. So I was just kind of like, oh.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and just some of the anecdotal conversations I've had is that with around the issues of bringing folks of color into journalism is that oftentimes they're sort of lost to other majors or even prior to sort of stepping foot on college campuses. So I would love to see more sort of happen with this. So let me know if I can help.
Yeah, and I think like the other question I have too is just like, what are the things that people are hearing about that would address some of the deeper issues that students face when they join newsrooms or whatever, and they're not in positions that are like welcoming and the culture? So like that's kind of the thing that I'm really interested in thinking about, or hearing ideas about how we might think about culture shift and what's been tried before and like what has failed. And, you know, because like, you know, recruiting people, it's hard already to recruit anyone into the field because it's a shrinking field and it doesn't look like a great job prospect. And then you add layer on top of that where you're trying to recruit students of color. It's just like, that's a hard place to start for me. Like, I mean, it's the most hopeful place because like, you know, it like culture shift can change in different ways, but like, I think it's just like a both and. So I'd be interested to hear like what people are thinking about or hearing promising practices, things that haven't worked about culture shift within newsrooms. Cause like the only thing that I've heard folks, any newsrooms starting to take on is what Rocky Mountain PBS, the approach Rocky Mountain PBS is taking with their own newsroom, and kind of like a train the trainer approach with just like directly addressing white fragility. And like, that's exciting, but it's not going to capture everyone. And like, some people don't want to start there, but I guess I'm just interested to hear more of that, more options for culture shift practices or programs or things we could support. Does anyone have thoughts on that? And I know Philip does. Philip, you can jump in, but anyone else?
The culture thing, but you know, I've had this conversation with Jill Farshman a lot, and she's very blunt about like, folks don't want to come to the field because it's shrinking and there's no money. Like, folks want to get paid, but I think that there's space for us to really, you know, dig deep, find out more, and to lean into sort of like the next generation of where journalism is going, like a lot of the tech aspects and the entrepreneurial aspects of the field, I think would really appeal to young go-getters, you know, on college campuses. And of course, like most sort of have the built-in, you know, belief in wanting to help their communities, right? And so there's the justice component to it. I think all three of those things could really grow some interest.
I love it. I love it.
We have another working group that's diverse hiring and retention. And in the next meeting, we're going to have a presentation from a group called Work-Life Partnership, which is a client of ours here at Open Media Foundation. I just put a link to their website in. And of course, they're not going to be like the end-all be-all like fix for people, but one of their programs is focused on helping workplace cultures be more welcoming of diverse employees and diverse team members. And so they're going to be presenting on how that could potentially be useful for media organizations. We've done some animation videos and some kind of teaching materials. So some of our staff have gotten a little bit steeped in their methodologies because we've had to make multimedia versions of their methodology, and we've found it really, really useful. So yeah, I'm excited to learn more about it too, but that's one thing that'll be presented in that other working group.
Tony, I have a question for you, like about process and stuff. I mean, so do you see this group, like we kind of are sharing information about different people wanting to work on surveying or doing something like a big project like that? How do you feel like this group a place where that work moves forward, or how does that get done? Or do we just alert each other that we're all interested in it and then go kind of create other projects or something? Because I guess that's just a question I have. It's great, like we're taking the first step of communicating that different people are interested in getting their hands around who is in the newsrooms, and I think that's really important and valid, and just the how and like who does it, and like how does that move forward from here in your mind?
Well, I think some of the tools that Colleen just shared with us is the model that we're trying to use and follow. And for us, one of the big first steps is just making sure different people are aware. I mean, if Philip or someone hadn't sent us what Danica had sent them, there would have been two different groups working on this exact same thing. And also it's because of this group that we found out that that INN had done a very similar thing. So I think that's one of the main goals of these working groups is not necessarily to be like working groups in the sense of like a working meeting where we're doing work in the meeting to collect that data or something like that, but just to make sure that everybody in this community knows what each other are working on, so that we aren't replicating efforts and so that we are collaborating. And I think some of those tools that Colleen just presented for us are just like, good ways to help prioritize and triage those things, and their whole model of making sure it's, champion driven, where it's not just like an Open Media Foundation or a Colorado Media Project that says we think this would be good, and so we keep this thing alive that really the industry isn't really pushing for. We're trying to make sure that if these groups aren't interested in collaborating or aren't doing the work, then we don't try and keep it on life support. But if they are doing it, that we make sure that they're not reinventing the wheel or duplicating efforts. Does that even answer your question?
It does, to a certain extent. I mean, I think, like I said, the first step is becoming aware, but then I'm just wondering, like, what does it take to move to the next step? Because I always come to these meetings and get a lot of great information, and it helps guide what we're doing and kind of making connections. But like, that is a concrete example of something that like, is it like, do we think that like, what is it, ONA, like, are they kind of the kernel, and like now we just kind of all support them and getting that done and kind of, running in the same direction that they're running? Or is Jordan going to take that role and like be the fulcrum of the project? Because otherwise it's like, oh, that's nice, you're doing that, it's not quite exactly what I'm doing, so I'm going to go off and continue doing my thing. Like, I feel like that's just and then what's the expected accountability of like who's moving stuff forward? From where you sit, I guess.
I think everyone here creates their own accountability just to this group. And, one of OMF's core values is innovation, and that if we aren't doing things, we just don't replicate other people's efforts. So if it turns out that either ONA, although I don't think ONA is doing anything, but if it turns out that ONA or INN or Chalkbeat or Denver Post are doing that, we're going to just try and support their efforts, try and hopefully also tweak it so that it fits the needs of anybody else that's involved that has overlapping needs. But I think we need to, it's a shame that none of them are on this call, but of course we just met them 2 days ago.
I guess that's all I'm wondering is like, is there a role for you guys to play as an organizing force in some of that? Because, like they didn't show up, but it is something that I think enough people on this call want to pursue. And so, just really connecting those dots, is that the role that Jordan could play, or is that the role that OMF in general wants to play?
Coordinating and ensuring that, and again, I realize I'm a little more steeped in it because of their reviewing their toolkit, but what Colleen was just kind of showing is the approach of how we are planning to do that and coordinate efforts. And that work would have to happen outside of these working group meetings, but then kind of consistent report backs. And then, this is also an opportunity to pull more people in if we know that Colorado Media Project wants to be involved in designing that, or has some capacity to help with the legwork required, or any of that, then this meeting is how we're going to keep reporting to people on, yeah, these are the priorities. This is the work that's been done since. This is what we're continuing to do. So our status with that project right now is we just want to make sure that we aren't doing it in a vacuum. So we've developed the structure and rubric that we developed with BBC Consulting. We don't want to move forward and distribute that and say like, yes, let's all please do these diversity metrics following this structure until we understand if INN's already kind of done something and if those numbers would be able to be even compared, you know, if they're tracking diversity in the same way we are. If they aren't, those numbers can't, you know, aren't comparable. And anybody else that's doing it. So including that group that came out of the Online News Association.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I think the INN stuff is just a heads up that they have done a national survey, not necessarily that it should impede any local work. It's just like if we wanted to ask the same questions, we could perhaps have a national comparison. So it wasn't like, that's not one that I would be too concerned about like conflicting or overlapping with, unless it's really just if you wanted to use it as a model, because it had also been, it was a survey that was out in the field with newsrooms, you know, so they kind of designed it as an instrument to get feedback for public consumption and public report outs. Whereas I think the tool you guys developed, if I'm not mistaken, is a little bit more of an introspective, like reflective way for newsrooms to measure themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I think the ONA is really kind of has the goal of being more of putting out a public report. And I think that's what the Media Project got a little excited about too, because like, I think everyone's kind of wondering, and we did that a little bit we did that 2018 survey that we did with INN where we looked at business models and whatnot. And it asked some questions about newsroom diversity, I think. So we had a little bit of data on that, but it was just like, hey, guess what? Newsrooms are pretty white, you know, like it was very, and it was only like 12 newsrooms. We were only looking at like nonprofit startups and digital startups. So I would love to see something broader. And I think, you know, the Media Project would be, CoLab and the Media Project would be interested in, you know, being a support role in that, not necessarily taking the lead, but like figuring out how to get that done. So, you know, as those conversations move forward, I think that's something we would find as a high value.
We'll at least keep, you know, if you want to, we'll make sure you stay in any communication we're having with them. We'll definitely keep Philip, since he opened that door in the first place, feed in any communication that happens with that group, so that, yeah, any input you guys have or kind of redirection. And we certainly don't want to dictate how it's going. First, it's not the model of the next generation sector partnership. But second, we don't have the effing capacity to do all of that. So yeah, these things will only survive if they fit the goals of a number of different groups in the sector. And yeah, so yeah, we really, part of the reason Jordan took such a lead in doing what he's done so far is OMF is committed to getting this data about ourselves anyway. So all the work he did to kind of update the work we did with BBC Consulting and to collect all of our data, we just wanted that anyway. So we hope it's a good model or a good jumping off point for what we all do collaboratively as a sector. But we were down to do the work anyway, because we want to have that mirror held up for ourselves.
And you had raised a good point, Tony, when we talked about is that, you know, it's much more effective and powerful if we're collecting standardized data across the board and it's going out to as many people as possible. And I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, Melissa, what I'm hearing is because we're seeing so many efforts sort of popping up right now that there maybe we could all benefit from like a centralized, I don't know, something to sort of like have it live and grow and everyone sort of be aware of how it moves forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and probably like even beyond being aware, but like help like move it forward. Because otherwise I feel like like the ONA is a volunteer group, you know, so I wouldn't, like when I saw their plans, I was really inspired and it was like great to see that they had so much enthusiasm, but I also was kind of like, we are the groups that have full-time staffers doing this thing. Like that's a Denver Post reporter that is kind of taking it upon her shoulders because she knows it needs to be done. Whereas like we've got, you know, university at the table, we've got like OMF, we've got us, like I kind of feel an onus to say, how do we help I mean, not at all to like take that ownership away at all. Like if they want to own that and they have the resources and the dedication and the whatever, I guess just, you know, like that was, I guess my question is that like, since you're holding the space for this type of thing, is this something that you, you know, sorry, my son is trying to get me to open his iPad.
So I think we can commit to by next meeting having what we would recommend based on kind of like a environmental assessment of what other people are doing, because we never want to do stuff just in a vacuum. We don't want to just blaze ahead with anything.
Sure.
But once we've looked at what else is out there, I think we could commit to by the next working group meeting having what we would recommend, and I hope that we includes Danica's group and the ONA group, and also any input we can get from INN, although they haven't been too responsive.
Yeah, no, I think that would be super helpful. Like just knowing that you will move that forward and like come up with a recommendation, and that I think that's awesome. What is that? What kind of what you think, Philip? Or yeah, he's nodding. So we would love for you to do that, Tony. It's super important, and I think it's great work. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I worry we've gone a couple minutes beyond our time. So Jordan, anything else we need to do before we let everybody go?
That's all. Next steps will be coming out pretty soon. And I just want to thank everybody for coming to these meetings, and also let you guys know that my contract is up. So this is my final meeting.
No, Jordan.
My colleagues will be taking over, but I'll be still around working behind the scenes a little bit, coordinating some diversity measures.
Right.
Cool. Thank you. And we'll
thank
post
you.
this, Jordan, if you don't have time, will you show Aaron how to make sure this gets posted on the Colorado Media Alliance site, where we can jump to any section and make it a little easier for people to find all these links that got posted in comments, that sort of thing. We'll keep that database going on the Colorado CMA.media website.
Okay.
Cool.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks for
All
your
right.
work.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
All right.